Waitress saw everyone ignore the Dragon King's mute son until she used sign language. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The small diner sat at the edge of humanity's first interstellar spaceport, a humble establishment frequented by both humans and the occasional alien visitor. It was here that Mia Bennett, a 25-year-old waitress with calloused hands and dreams bigger than her tips, would encounter a visitor who would change not just her life, but the course of human-galactic relations forever. Mia adjusted her worn apron as she wiped down the countertop of the stellar pit stop diner. The artificial lighting flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows across the retro-themed establishment. Business was slow today, which wasn't unusual for a Tuesday afternoon. The spaceport's main traffic came on weekends when the luxury cruisers docked, bringing wealthy tourists eager to experience authentic human cuisine before continuing their journeys through the galaxy. Her manager, Frank, a gruff man with perpetual stubble and kind eyes despite his rough exterior, emerged from the back office. He carried a stack of flyers and slapped them on the counter. "Big news, Mia," he said, sliding one toward her. "The Draconian diplomatic fleet is arriving tomorrow. Apparently, the Dragon King himself is making a stopover at our little spaceport." Mia picked up the flyer. The image showed an imposing reptilian figure adorned in ornate armor that seemed to be made of actual precious metals and gemstones. The Draconians were one of the most powerful species in the known galaxy, with a vast empire spanning hundreds of systems. Unlike many aliens humanity had encountered since joining the Galactic Concord 20 years ago, Draconians looked remarkably like the dragons of Earth mythology, though they walked upright and possessed opposable thumbs. Their scales shimmered with an iridescence that no Earth reptile could match, and they stood nearly 8 feet tall on average. "They're stopping here? At our port?" Mia asked incredulously. The stellar spaceport was hardly the most prestigious facility, situated on the outskirts of one of humanity's smaller colony worlds, Novatera. Frank nodded. "Diplomatic mission. Something about strengthening ties with outlying human colonies. The main fleet is headed to Earth, but the king is making personal visits to several human outposts. Think they'll come in for a bite?" Mia joked, gesturing around the empty diner. Frank shrugged. "Who knows? But the Port Authority wants all businesses ready to accommodate our esteemed visitors. So brush up on your draconian etiquette. They've included a pamphlet." He handed her a small digital tablet with basic information about draconian customs and taboos. Mia scrolled through the information absently. Most of it was standard fare for dealing with important aliens. Nothing she hadn't learned during her brief stint at Novatera Community College's Xen Relations program before dropping out to help support her younger brother after their parents died in a shuttle accident. That evening, after her shift, Mia sat in her tiny apartment reviewing the draconian information more thoroughly. One section caught her attention, detailing draconian communication methods. While they spoke a complex language of their own, most Draconians were fluent in Standard Galactic, the simplified trade language used throughout the Concord. However, the article mentioned that Draconians also utilized an elaborate system of hand gestures as a secondary communication method, particularly in formal settings. Mia's interest was piqued. Her younger brother, Theo, had been born deaf, and she had learned sign language from an early age to communicate with him. She wondered how Draconian hand gestures might compare to human sign language. She spent the next few hours watching tutorials on Draconian gestural communication, noting with fascination the similarities to human sign language. Though the meanings were different, many of the hand configurations were strikingly similar, likely due to the shared physical constraints of having similar hand structures despite different evolutionary paths. She practiced a few basic greeting gestures, smiling at the thought of impressing some minor Draconian official if they happened to visit the diner. The next morning, Mia arrived at work early. The spaceport was abuzz with activity, security personnel, and port officials rushing about in preparation for the Draconian arrival. The diner had been given a hasty cleaning, and Frank had splurged on new tablecloths for the occasion. "You think this is really necessary?" Mia asked, adjusting the cheap plastic flowers that had appeared on each table overnight. "Probably not," Frank admitted. but the port administrator specifically mentioned that the royal party might tour local establishments. Something about the king wanting to experience authentic colony life. Mia rolled her eyes, but continued preparing the diner for the day's business. By mid-morning, the regular customers began trickling in, mostly dock workers and spaceport staff grabbing coffee or a quick meal before their shifts. At precisely 1200 hours, a collective gasp from the customers facing the windows alerted Mia to something happening outside. She turned to see three massive ships descending toward the spaceport, their hulls gleaming like burnished gold in the colony's artificial sunlight. Even from a distance, the ships were clearly unlike anything that typically visited Novaterra. They were elegant and serpentine in design, resembling ancient Chinese dragons more than conventional spacecraft. "Well, I'll be damned," Frank muttered, stepping up beside her. They really came. The entire diner watched as the ships landed with surprising grace for vessels of their size. News feeds activated throughout the spaceport, showing the draconian delegation disembarking, led by an enormous figure that could only be the Dragon King himself. King Theraxis of the Draconian Empire stood nearly 10 feet tall, his scales a deep crimson with gold highlights that caught the light with every movement. His head was adorned with an elaborate crest of horns that formed a natural crown, and he wore armor that appeared to be crafted from materials not found on any human world. Behind him came a procession of other Draconians, slightly smaller but no less impressive, all wearing armor and insignia that denoted their ranks within the Draconian hierarchy. The spaceport administrator greeted them with obvious nervousness, bowing deeply as the king approached. The news feed captured their exchange, the king's voice deep and resonant even through the speakers. "We are pleased to visit this human outpost," King Theraxis said in perfect standard galactic. "It is our wish to better understand the daily lives of our human allies in preparation for the expanded trade agreements being discussed with your Earth government." The feed cut away to commentary from excited news anchors, and gradually, the diner's customers returned to their meals, though conversation remained focused on the unexpected royal visit. Hours passed, and the initial excitement began to wane. The Draconian delegation was touring the main spaceport facilities, and it seemed increasingly unlikely that they would venture as far as the small diner on the outskirts. Mia was serving a group of engineers when the diner's door chimed. She glanced up casually, then froze. Standing in the doorway was a Draconian in ornate armor, flanked by two others who were clearly guards. The Draconian was smaller than the king they had seen on the news feed, but still towered over the tallest human in the diner. The entire establishment fell silent. Frank emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands nervously on his apron. "Welcome to the Stellar Pit Stop," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "We are honored by your presence." The Draconian nodded regally but did not speak. Instead, one of the guards stepped forward. "Prince Kaizan, heir to the Draconian throne, wishes to experience this establishment," the guard announced formally. "The king believes it important for the prince to understand all aspects of human colonial life." Frank bowed awkwardly. Of course. Please, take any table you wish." The prince moved with fluid grace to a corner booth, his guards positioning themselves nearby but not sitting. The other customers stared openly, some surreptitiously taking photos with their personal devices despite the glares from the Draconian guards. Mia approached the table, digital menu in hand, trying to recall everything she had read about Draconian protocol. She bowed as she had seen the spaceport administrator do. "Welcome, Your Highness," she said, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered as the information packet had suggested. "May I present our menu for your consideration?" The prince took the device, but made no verbal response. One of the guards spoke again. "Prince Kaizan will survey your offerings. Bring water while he decides." Mia nodded and hurried to fetch a pitcher of water. When she returned, she noticed the prince studying the menu with apparent interest, occasionally tapping an item to view more details. She carefully poured water into the glass, noting how the prince's scales shifted color slightly in the diner's lighting, from a deep blue to an almost purple hue at the edges. "May I answer any questions about our menu, Your Highness?" she asked. The prince looked up at her, and Mia was struck by his eyes, which were a vivid amber with vertical pupils. He made a series of gestures with his hands, but remained silent. The guard stepped forward again. "The prince has selected this item," he said, pointing to the menu. "He will also sample your earth beverage called chocolate milkshake." Mia nodded, taking the menu. "Excellent choice, Your Highness. The Stellar Burger is one of our specialties. I'll bring your order shortly." As she walked away, she overheard one of the other customers whispering to his companion. "Weird that he doesn't talk, isn't it? Maybe he thinks speaking to humans is beneath him." Mia frowned, but said nothing as she delivered the order to the kitchen. Frank was already preparing the burger, his hands shaking slightly. "A real live draconian prince in my diner," he kept muttering. "Wait until my mother hears about this." When the food was ready, Mia delivered it to the prince's table with as much ceremony as she could muster, which wasn't much in the humble diner. The prince examined the burger curiously before carefully picking it up and taking a bite. His expression was unreadable to Mia's human eyes, but he continued eating, which she took as a positive sign. Throughout the meal, she noticed that the prince never spoke, communicating only through gestures to his guards. The other customers seemed to be giving the table a wide berth, and the initial excitement had turned into an awkward tension that filled the diner. When the prince finished eating, Mia approached again. "Did you enjoy your meal, Your Highness?" The prince made another series of hand gestures, which the guard translated. The prince found the experience adequately informative regarding human culinary practices. Mia nodded, but as she studied the prince's gestures more carefully, something clicked in her mind. The movements were similar to some she had used with her brother. On impulse, she responded with a simple sign from human sign language. "Thank you for visiting." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The prince's eyes widened, and his scales rippled with a sudden shift of color that spread from his neck to his crest. He straightened in his seat and made a rapid series of gestures that Mia couldn't follow. The guards tensed, one of them stepping forward aggressively. "What did you do, human?" Mia stepped back, alarmed. "I just signed thank you in human sign language." I noticed the prince was using hand gestures and thought there might be similarities. The prince made another gesture, and the guard reluctantly backed away. Then, slowly and deliberately, the prince formed a gesture that Mia recognized from her studies the night before, the draconian sign for understanding. Heart racing, Mia responded with the human sign for hello, followed by spelling out her name. The prince watched intently, then attempted to mimic her movements, his larger, clawed hands making the gestures somewhat clumsily, but recognizably. "Your Highness," one guard began, "we should return to the royal vessel. The king will be expecting a report." But the prince ignored him, instead making another series of gestures toward Mia, mixing draconian signs with attempts at human ones. Mia struggled to understand, catching only fragments, but it was clear the prince was excited by this development. She remembered something from the information packet about draconians valuing knowledge exchange and took a chance. "Would Your Highness like to learn more human signs?" she asked, demonstrating the sign for learn as she spoke. The prince nodded vigorously, an unmistakably enthusiastic gesture across species. He turned to his guards and made a commanding series of gestures. The guards looked uncomfortable but bowed in acquiescence. "The prince wishes to extend his visit to this establishment," one guard announced stiffly. "He requests that you continue this cultural exchange." Frank appeared beside Mia, looking bewildered. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," Mia said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "I think the prince and I just had a breakthrough. He uses a form of sign language, and there are similarities to human signs. He wants to learn more." Frank's eyebrows shot up. "Well, don't let me stop you. This is the most exciting thing to happen in this diner since that movie star stopped by last year." He retreated to the kitchen, occasionally peering out to watch the unusual interaction. For the next hour, Mia sat across from the draconian prince, exchanging basic signs. The other customers watched in fascination as the human waitress and alien royalty communicated through gestures, occasionally laughing when one or the other made a mistake. The prince proved to be a quick study, rapidly adapting human signs to his different hand structure. Mia learned that the prince's name signed was a flowing motion that resembled water cascading over rocks, which she could not replicate exactly but approximated. In turn, she taught him how to sign her name properly in human sign language. Through their limited but growing shared vocabulary, Mia began to understand that Prince Kaizen had not spoken since hatching, a condition that was apparently rare but not unheard of among Draconians. The gestural language was developed primarily for him, though it had become a formal communication method used in the royal court as well. What struck Mia most was how expressive the prince became once they established communication. His scales shifted through subtle color variations that seemed to correspond to his emotions, and his eyes conveyed a keen intelligence and curiosity that transcended the language barrier. As they continued their exchange, the diner's door chimed again. Everyone turned to see King Thraxus himself ducking to enter the establishment, accompanied by several advisors and guards. The customers and staff immediately bowed, including Mia, who hastily stood and inclined her head respectfully. The Dragon King's presence seemed to fill the small diner, his massive frame making the space feel suddenly cramped. His scales gleamed with a deeper, richer crimson than they had appeared on the news feed, and up close, Mia could see the intricate patterns that ran across his hide, telling a story she could not read. "My son has extended his visit to this place," the king said, his voice a deep rumble that Mia felt as much as heard. "I came to discover why." Prince Kaizen immediately began signing to his father, his movements excited and rapid. The king watched, his expression impossible for Mia to interpret, though she noticed his scales shifting slightly in color, much as his son's had done. After the prince finished, the king turned his gaze to Mia. She fought the urge to step back under the intensity of those ancient eyes. "You communicate with my son in your human hand language?" the king asked. Mia swallowed nervously. "Yes, your majesty. I noticed similarities between the prince's gestures and human sign language, which I learned from my deaf brother. I thought there might be enough common ground to establish basic communication." "Show me," the king commanded. Mia demonstrated a few simple signs, explaining their meanings. Prince Kaizen eagerly joined in, showing his father what he had learned. To everyone's surprise, the king made a gesture of his own, which the prince answered with obvious delight. "Interesting," the king said. "In all our travels and diplomatic exchanges with various species, none have possessed a communication method so compatible with our royal signs." He studied Mia with new interest. "You are a server in this establishment, yet you possess this knowledge. Explain." Mia briefly told the king about her brother and how she had learned sign language from childhood. "It's not uncommon on Earth and human colonies," she explained. "Many people with hearing impairments use sign language, and their families often learn it too." The king made a sound that might have been contemplative. "Among my people, the royal signs were developed specifically for my son and are known only within the court and to high-ranking officials. The commonality between our methods is unexpected." One of the king's advisors stepped forward, speaking in a language Mia did not understand. The king responded in the same tone, a series of resonant sounds that reminded Mia of distant thunder. The advisor looked unhappy but bowed and stepped back. "My son rarely shows interest in diplomatic functions," the king said, returning to standard Galactic. "He finds them tedious without the ability to participate fully. Yet he has spent an unusual amount of time here, engaged with you." He gestured toward Mia with a clawed hand. "This suggests potential." Mia wasn't sure how to respond, so she simply bowed again. "I'm honored that the prince found our exchange worthwhile, your majesty." The prince made another series of signs, looking at his father imploringly. The king watched, then nodded slowly. "My son requests that you accompany us back to the royal vessel to continue this cultural exchange. He believes there is much more to learn from you regarding human sign communication." Mia's jaw dropped. "Me? Go to your ship." "Unless you have objections," the king said, in a tone that suggested he was not accustomed to having his invitations declined. Mia glanced at Frank, who was standing nearby with an expression of utter disbelief. He gave her a small nod, as if to say, "How can you possibly say no?" "I would be honored, your majesty," Mia said, untying her apron. "Though I should mention I'm not an expert in sign language. There are professional interpreters and linguists who would know far more than I do." "Perhaps," the king acknowledged, "but you are the one who recognized the connection and took the initiative to communicate with my son. That suggests an intuition that formal training might not provide. Besides, My son seems to have developed a preference for your teaching method. The prince signed something again, and Mia caught enough to understand he was complimenting her patience and creativity in bridging their communication gap. Thank you, Your Highness, she signed back, eliciting another color ripple across the prince's scales. As Mia prepared to leave with the royal party, Frank hurried over to her. Are you sure about this? He whispered. Going to an alien spacecraft with people you just met? Mia smiled reassuringly. They're official diplomatic visitors, Frank. It's not like they're going to abduct me. She looked toward the prince, who was watching her interaction curiously. Besides, this is important. Think about it. Human sign language being compatible with draconian signs? That could be huge for interspecies relations. Frank sighed. Just be careful, kid. And if you end up establishing galactic peace or something, remember who gave you those days off last month when your brother was sick. Mia laughed and impulsively hugged her gruff manager. I'll be back for my shift tomorrow, I promise. The journey to the royal vessel was surreal. Mia was escorted in an official draconian transport, seated across from Prince Kaizen, while the king traveled in a separate vehicle. The prince continued to practice signs with her throughout the short flight, his enthusiasm evident in the vibrant colors shifting across his scales. When they arrived at the largest of the draconian ships, Mia gasped at the interior. Unlike the utilitarian designs of human spacecraft, the draconian vessel was ornate, with soaring ceilings and walls that appeared to be made of living material, shifting subtly with patterns that resembled flowing water or wind through tall grass. It's beautiful, she said aloud, then repeated the sentiment in sign language for the prince's benefit. Prince Kaizen signed back, and though Mia couldn't understand all of it, she gathered he was proud of his people's aesthetic achievements. He led her through corridors that curved organically, passing other draconians who stopped and bowed as the prince passed. Many gave Mia curious looks, but showed no hostility toward the human in their midst. They arrived at a spacious chamber that Mia guessed was some kind of meeting room or study. The walls were lined with objects that might have been books or data storage devices, and a large table dominated the center, surrounded by seats sized for draconian frames. King Theraxis was already there, deep in conversation with several advisors. They fell silent as Mia and the prince entered, all eyes turning to the human visitor. The cultural exchange will continue here, the king announced. My advisors are interested in observing this communication method. Mia nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of expectation. I'll do my best, Your Majesty, though I should warn you again that I'm not a certified instructor or linguist. Understood, the king said. Proceed as you would naturally. My son seems to learn best through practical application rather than formal instruction. For the next few hours, Mia and Prince Kaizen continued their sign language exchange, now observed by a growing number of draconian officials. The prince proved remarkably adept at adapting human signs to his physiology, and Mia found herself learning more of the royal signs in return. One of the king's advisors, introduced as Scholar Nexus, took particular interest in the proceedings. She was smaller than the other draconians Mia had seen, her scales a deep blue that darkened to almost black at the edges. She asked numerous questions about human sign language, its development, and its prevalence in human society. Fascinating that your species developed a complete visual language, Scholar Nexus commented. Most species we have encountered rely primarily on vocal or telepathic communication, with gestural components serving only as supplements. Necessity drives innovation, Mia replied. Humans who cannot hear still need to communicate, so communities developed sign languages independently all over Earth. What we're using now is actually just one of many human sign languages. There are others? Scholar Nexus looked intrigued. With different structures and vocabularies? Yes, dozens of them. Some countries or regions have their own distinct sign languages that developed separately from others. The scholar made notes on a device that resembled a tablet but seemed to respond to her thoughts rather than touch. And yet they all would share basic physical constraints and principles, given human anatomy. Mia nodded. Exactly. Just like the draconian royal signs share some fundamental elements with human signs because we have similar hand structures, despite evolving on different planets. Prince Kaizen signed something to Scholar Nexus, who nodded thoughtfully before addressing Mia again. The prince suggests that this commonality might extend to other aspects of our cultures, that perhaps there are more areas where our species align than we have previously recognized. As the session continued, Mia began to realize that this impromptu language lesson had transformed into something more significant. The Draconians were not merely humoring the prince's interest. They were genuinely engaged in exploring the implications of this shared communication method. Eventually, King Thraxus called for a recess. "You must require sustenance and rest," he said to Mia. "Arrangements have been made for your comfort." Mia was shown to a chamber that had been hastily adapted for human use, with furniture scaled to her size and environmental controls adjusted to human preferences. A meal was provided that consisted of familiar human foods alongside some draconian offerings that were certified safe for human consumption. As she ate alone, Mia tried to process the day's events. That morning, she had been a waitress in a small diner on a minor colony world. Now she was aboard the flagship of the Draconian royal fleet, potentially involved in a significant diplomatic development. The absurdity of it all made her laugh out loud. A chime sounded, followed by a voice speaking standard Galactic. "Mia Bennett, Scholar Nexus requests permission to enter." Granted," Mia replied, still not used to the formality. The door slid open to reveal the blue-scaled scholar. She entered and bowed slightly. "I hope I am not disturbing your rest period." "Not at all," Mia assured her. "Please, join me. Would you like some of this fruit? I can't pronounce the name, but it's delicious." Scholar Nexus declined with a gesture, but took a seat across from Mia. "I wish to speak with you privately about the implications of today's events." Mia set down her fork. "I'm listening." "The compatibility between our communication methods is more significant than you may realize," the scholar began. "The Draconian Empire has existed for millennia, contacting countless species across the galaxy. In all that time, we have never encountered another species whose communication methods align so naturally with our own. This suggests a deeper connection that defies conventional evolutionary understanding. Maybe it's just convergent evolution," Mia suggested. "Similar problems leading to similar solutions, even on different worlds." "Perhaps," Scholar Nexus acknowledged. "But there is another factor that makes this discovery particularly timely. Are you familiar with the current political climate between the Draconian Empire and the Galactic Concord?" Mia shook her head. "Only vaguely. I know we've had diplomatic relations for about 20 years, since shortly after humans joined the Concord. The relationship has been cordial but distant," the scholar explained. "There are factions within both the Empire and the Concord who prefer it remain that way. However, King Thraxus has been advocating for closer ties, particularly with humans, whom he finds intriguingly adaptable." "And the prince?" Mia asked. Scholar Nexus's scales shifted to a deeper shade of blue. "Prince Kaizan has been a complicated factor in these diplomatic efforts. His inability to vocalize has been perceived by some as a weakness, particularly among certain conservative factions of our own society and some of the more martially inclined species of the Concord." Mia frowned. "That's ridiculous. His use of sign language doesn't affect his intelligence or abilities." "You and I understand this," the scholar said, "but prejudices exist in all cultures, including both of ours. The prince has often been sidelined in diplomatic functions, with others speaking for him despite his keen mind and insights." A thought occurred to Mia. That's why this compatibility between our sign languages is so important. It's not just about communication, it's about perception. Scholar Nexus nodded, her eyes brightening. "Precisely. If human sign language and Draconian royal signs are compatible enough to establish effective communication between our species, it elevates the status of both. It transforms what some saw as a limitation into a unique diplomatic asset. And it creates a special connection between humans and Draconians," Mia added, beginning to understand the political implications. "Indeed, the king has been seeking such a connection to strengthen his argument for closer ties with humanity. Your simple act of recognition may have provided exactly what he needed at a crucial moment." Mia sat back, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "So what happens now? I'm just a waitress, not a diplomat or linguistic expert." "That is being discussed," Scholar Nexus admitted. but I believe your role will extend beyond today's initial exchange. The prince has rarely shown such enthusiasm for any diplomatic interaction. His connection with you appears genuine, and the king values his son's happiness as well as the political advantages this situation presents. Before Mia could respond, another chime sounded. Scholar Nexus and Mia Bennett, your presence is requested in the Royal Council chamber, the voice announced. As they made their way through the ship, Scholar Nexus offered one last piece of advice. Speak honestly. The king values authenticity, especially from humans. Your directness is one of the traits he finds most refreshing about your species. The council chamber was larger than the previous meeting room and more elaborately decorated. Along one wall was a massive display showing what appeared to be a map of the galaxy, with certain regions highlighted in various colors. King Theraxis sat at the head of a long table, with Prince Kaizan at his right hand and various advisors filling the remaining seats. Mia was directed to a seat that had been adjusted for her height, directly across from the prince. She smiled at him, and he responded with a simple sign for greeting that she had taught him earlier. Mia Bennett, the king began without preamble. My advisors and I have been discussing the significance of today's discovery. We believe it warrants further exploration and development. Mia nodded, waiting for him to continue. We propose a formal cultural exchange program, focused initially on developing a comprehensive bridge between human sign language and draconian royal signs. This would serve as a foundation for broader cultural understanding between our peoples. That sounds like an excellent idea, Your Majesty, Mia said carefully, though I'm not sure how I can help beyond what I've already shown the prince. The king's scales rippled slightly, a gesture that Mia was beginning to associate with thoughtfulness. You have demonstrated an intuitive understanding of cross-species communication that formal training might not provide. More importantly, you have connected with my son in a way that no other non-draconian has managed to do. Prince Kaizan signed something, and the king nodded. My son requests that you serve as his primary human liaison and instructor in this exchange program. He believes your practical approach and patience make you uniquely suited for the role. Mia blinked in surprise. I'm honored, Your Highness, truly. But I have responsibilities on Novaterra, including my brother who depends on me. And I'm not qualified for such an important position. Accommodations can be made for your brother, one of the advisors stated. And as for qualifications, you have already demonstrated the most essential one, the ability to bridge our communication methods effectively. Mia looked at the prince, who was watching her intently. He signed, Please consider, in the human sign she had taught him earlier that day. May I have some time to think about this? She asked. It's a lot to take in. Of course, the king said. We will return you to the spaceport, and you may provide your answer before our departure tomorrow. But know that this opportunity extends beyond you personally. It represents a potential turning point in relations between our species. As Mia was escorted back to the transport that would return her to the spaceport, her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The opportunity was incredible, beyond anything she could have imagined for herself. But it also meant leaving behind everything familiar, potentially for years. Prince Kaizan accompanied her to the transport. Before she boarded, he signed to her, more slowly and carefully than before. You saw me, he signed, using a combination of his royal signs and the human one she had taught him. Others see my silence. You saw my voice. Mia felt tears welling in her eyes as she responded with both voice and sign. Your voice was always there, Your Highness. I just recognized its form. The prince's scales rippled with vibrant colors, and he made a final sign before she entered the transport, one she hadn't taught him, but somehow understood perfectly. Friend. Back in her small apartment, Mia paced restlessly. Her younger brother, Theo, watched her with concern from the couch where he had been reading when she burst in with her incredible story. You have to go, he signed emphatically after she explained everything. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. What about you? She signed back. I can't just leave you here. Theo rolled his eyes. I'm 19, not 9. Besides, they said arrangements could be made. Maybe I could come with you eventually. To live among aliens? Away from everything familiar. Says the girl who always dreamed of seeing the stars. He responded with a teasing smile. Remember when we used to sit on the roof of the children's home, and you would point out where you wanted to go someday. Mia smiled at the memory. After their parents died, they had spent 2 years in a state facility before she turned 18 and could legally become Theo's guardian. Those nights on the roof had been their escape, dreaming of possibilities beyond their limited circumstances. "This isn't just about us," she signed after a moment. Scholar Nexus made it clear this could have major political implications. "All the more reason to say yes," Theo insisted. "How many people get a chance to make a difference on a galactic scale?" Mia laughed. "You make it sound so dramatic." "It is dramatic. My sister, the waitress who changed interstellar relations with a few hand gestures." She threw a couch pillow at him, which he dodged easily. But his words stayed with her as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling and weighing her options. By morning, she had made her decision. After ensuring Theo would be all right on his own for the day, she made her way to the spaceport, where the Draconian vessels still dominated the landing field. She was escorted directly to a meeting room within the port's administrative building, where King Theraxis, Prince Kaizan, and several advisors waited. The prince brightened visibly when she entered, his scales shifting to warmer hues. "You have considered our proposal?" the king asked after formal greetings were exchanged. "I have, Your Majesty," Mia replied, standing straight and meeting the Dragon King's gaze directly. "I am deeply honored by the opportunity and recognize its importance. I would like to accept, with 2 conditions." A murmur ran through the Draconian advisors. The king's expression remained impassive, but he gestured for her to continue. "First, my brother must be included in this arrangement. He's deaf and was my original reason for learning sign language. His insights would be invaluable to this project, and I won't leave him behind." The king nodded. "Reasonable. Your brother's expertise would indeed be an asset. And the second condition? I want to ensure that this exchange goes both ways. I'm happy to help the prince and others learn human sign language, but I also want to learn Draconian culture, history, and language thoroughly. If I'm to be an effective bridge between our peoples, I need to understand both sides equally." Prince Kaizan signed excitedly to his father, who watched with what Mia thought might be amusement, though Draconian expressions remained difficult for her to interpret. "My son enthusiastically endorses your conditions," the king said. "He says you show wisdom in recognizing that true communication requires mutual understanding." Scholar Nexus stepped forward. "We had already anticipated something similar. A comprehensive cultural exchange would be most effective. You and your brother would have access to extensive educational resources regarding Draconian civilization." "Then we have an agreement," Mia said, feeling a mix of nervousness and exhilaration. "Indeed," the king confirmed. "We depart for the Draconian homeworld in 3 standard days. This will allow time for your brother to be properly briefed and for both of you to make necessary arrangements. A liaison officer will assist you with all practical matters." As the meeting concluded and formal documents were prepared for her and Theo to review, Prince Kaizan approached Mia. His signing had already improved noticeably since the previous day. "Thank you," he signed. "New beginning for me. For us. For both peoples." "I hope so, Your Highness," she signed back. "I'm still amazed that a simple shift at the diner led to all this." His scales shimmered with what she now recognized as amusement. "Small moments, big changes. Universe works in strange ways." Mia smiled. "It certainly does." 3 days later, Mia and Theo stood at the boarding ramp of the Draconian royal vessel. Their few possessions had been packed and transported aboard, their apartment lease terminated, and goodbyes said to friends and colleagues. Frank had been particularly emotional, gruffly telling Mia to not forget the little people when she became a fancy space diplomat. Prince Kaizan waited for them at the top of the ramp, his scales glowing with a warm golden hue that Mia now knew indicated pleasure or excitement. Beside him stood Scholar Nexus, who had taken on the role of primary liaison for the human siblings. As they ascended the ramp, Theo signed to Mia. "I can't believe this is really happening." Mia signed back. "Neither can I, but somehow it feels right." The prince greeted them both with formal Draconian gestures before shifting to the human signs he had been practicing diligently. His movements were becoming more fluid and natural, adapting the signs to his different physiology with increasing skill. "Welcome," he signed to them. "New friends, new family, new future." Theo, who had been briefed on the situation and given a crash course in draconian royal signs, responded with a combination of human and draconian gestures that made the prince's scales ripple with delight. As the ship prepared for departure, Mia stood at a viewing port, watching Novatera fall away beneath them. She thought about the random series of events that had led to this moment. Her parents' death that forced her to drop out of college and take the diner job, learning sign language for Theo, happening to work the day the draconian delegation visited, making that impulsive decision to try signing to the prince. Small moments leading to big changes, as the prince had said. Scholar Nexus joined her at the viewport. Having second thoughts? She asked perceptively. Mia shook her head. No, just reflecting on how unpredictable life can be. A week ago, I was worried about making rent. Now I'm heading to the draconian homeworld as part of a historic cultural exchange. Life rarely follows a straight path, the scholar observed. The most significant discoveries often occur when we deviate from our expected routes. Like a waitress noticing that a prince uses sign language, Mia said with a smile. Precisely. Scholar Nexus turned to face her fully. You should know that the prince has already begun advocating for a broader implementation of cross-species sign language throughout the Galactic Concord. He believes it could serve as a universal secondary communication method that transcends the limitations of vocal language. That's ambitious, Mia commented. But fascinating. A galactic sign language that could work across different physiologies. Indeed. And it all began because you chose to see beyond silence. The scholar's scales shifted to a deep, rich blue. The Draconian Royal Archives contain a saying, "The greatest journeys begin with eyes that truly see." I believe you have such eyes, Mia Bennett. As the ship accelerated to faster-than-light travel, stars streaking past the viewport in brilliant lines of light, Mia thought about those words. She had never considered herself special or particularly insightful. She was just a waitress who happened to know sign language and had the impulse to use it when she recognized a need. Yet that simple act of recognition, of seeing beyond what others saw, had changed everything, not just for her, but potentially for interstellar relations more broadly. And it had given a voice, in a manner of speaking, to a prince who had too often been sidelined despite his intelligence and capabilities. Perhaps true understanding between different peoples, whether from different countries or different planets, began with that same principle, the willingness to look beyond the obvious differences and recognize the underlying commonalities, the shared needs and desires that connected all sentient beings. As Novatera disappeared from view, replaced by the vast starscape of interstellar space, Mia felt a profound sense of purpose settling over her. This journey was taking her far from everything familiar, but it was also taking her exactly where she needed to go. In the main gathering area of the ship, Prince Kaizan was already deep in conversation with Theo, both of them signing rapidly, occasionally laughing when one or the other made a mistake or discovered a particularly interesting linguistic parallel. The prince's guards watched with expressions that Mia interpreted as bemused tolerance, while several other Draconians observed the exchange with scholarly interest. King Theraxis entered the chamber, his massive presence commanding immediate attention. He observed his son's animated interaction with Theo for a moment before approaching Mia. It seems the cultural exchange has already begun in earnest, he noted, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. They're finding a lot of common ground, Mia replied. Theo is thrilled to have someone new to talk to who understands what it's like to communicate differently than most people around them. The king made a sound that might have been thoughtful. My son has faced many challenges due to his difference. Many in our court viewed his inability to vocalize as a deficiency, despite his other talents. That's unfortunately common across species, it seems, Mia said. Humans who are deaf or use other forms of communication often face similar prejudice. Yet your brother appears confident and self-assured. Mia smiled, watching Theo demonstrate something to the increasingly excited prince. He's had to be. We lost our parents when he was young, and the system isn't always kind to children who are different. But he never let it define him or limit what he could accomplish. A resilient spirit, the king observed. Like my son. Like you, perhaps. I just did what needed to be done, Mia said with a shrug. That, Mia Bennett, is often the definition of courage, the king replied. Doing what must be done, regardless of the challenges. He turned his ancient gaze upon her fully. You should know that your actions have already caused ripples throughout the Draconian court. Word has spread of the human waitress who spoke to the silent prince when others could not. Some find it threatening. Others see opportunity. Politics, Mia sighed. I'm not very good at navigating that sort of thing, Your Majesty. The king's scales shimmered with what might have been amusement. Few are naturally adept at it. But authenticity often cuts through political entanglements more effectively than careful maneuvering. Continue as you have begun, seeing with clear eyes and acting with an honest heart, and you will find your way. With that, he moved to join his son, greeting Theo with formal respect before engaging in the signing conversation. Mia watched as the Dragon King of a vast interstellar empire sat with his son and a human deaf boy, all three communicating with their hands, occasionally laughing at misunderstandings or particularly expressive gestures. It was, she thought, an image of hope. If such different beings could find common ground and genuine connection, perhaps there was hope for broader understanding across the galactic community. As the Draconian royal vessel sped toward the heart of the Empire, carrying its unusual passengers and their even more unusual mission, Mia felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Not since before her parents' deaths and the responsibilities that had followed. Something she had almost forgotten in the daily struggle to survive and provide for her brother. Hope, not just for herself and Theo, but for something larger. A hope that bridges could be built where none had existed before, that voices could be found where others heard only silence, that understanding could grow from the simplest acts of recognition. It had begun with a waitress noticing a prince's gestures in a small diner on the edge of human space. Where it would lead, no one could say with certainty. But as Mia watched her brother and the prince teaching the Dragon King a game that involved rapid sign exchanges, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, this journey was already worth it. The royal vessel continued its journey through the stars, carrying its precious cargo of new possibilities toward a future where communication might transcend the barriers of species and physiology, all because someone had taken the time to truly see beyond silence. In the weeks that followed their departure from Novaterra, life aboard the Draconian royal vessel settled into a rhythm for Mia and Theo. Each day brought new discoveries as they delved deeper into Draconian culture and history, while simultaneously developing a more comprehensive bridge between human sign language and the Draconian royal signs. Prince Kaizan proved to be an eager and astute student, rapidly expanding his vocabulary of human signs and adapting them to his physiology. More surprisingly, other members of the royal entourage began to take an interest in learning as well, particularly younger Draconians who served in various capacities aboard the vessel. It seems you're starting a trend, Scholar Nexus observed one afternoon as she and Mia watched a group of Draconian youths practicing signs with Theo. I never expected others beyond the prince to be so interested, Mia admitted. The young are often more open to new ideas, the scholar replied. And there is something inherently appealing about a form of communication that transcends vocal limitations. Some of our people have begun to view it as an additional skill rather than merely an accommodation for the prince. This shift in perception became increasingly evident as their journey continued. What had begun as a specialized communication method for Prince Kaizan was evolving into something broader, a secondary language that was being embraced by a growing number of Draconians aboard the ship. King Theraxis observed these developments with what Mia interpreted as cautious approval. Though he participated less directly in the daily signing sessions than his son, he regularly received reports on the progress being made and occasionally joined discussions about the more formalized bridge language that was beginning to emerge. The king sees potential beyond what even he initially envisioned, Scholar Nexus confided to Mia one evening as they shared a meal in the scholar's private quarters. What began as a diplomatic opportunity might become a cultural transformation. That seems like a lot of weight to put on sign language, Mia said, still adjusting to the idea that her impulsive gesture in the diner could have such far-reaching consequences. It is not merely about the language itself, Nexus explained, her scales shifting to deeper blues as they often did when she was engaged in serious discussion. It is about what it represents, a willingness to see value in different modes of being and interacting. The Draconian Empire has existed for millennia, with traditions and hierarchies that have remained largely unchanged. Change does not come easily to such ancient societies. And yet here we are, Mia observed, hurtling through space toward the Draconian homeworld with a revolutionary new way of communicating. Scholar Nexus's scales rippled with what Mia now recognized as amusement. Indeed, though not all will welcome this development, you should be prepared for resistance when we arrive at the imperial capital. From whom? There are conservative factions within the imperial court who view the prince's condition as a weakness and who resist closer ties with younger species like humanity. They will not appreciate anything that elevates either. Mia frowned. But if the king supports this initiative, surely that's what matters most. Even kings must navigate political currents, Nexus replied. King Theraxis is powerful, but not absolute in his authority. The Draconian governance system includes a council of elders whose support is necessary for major policy changes. And many on the council are traditionalists. This warning proved prescient when, several days before their arrival at the Draconian homeworld, a new delegation boarded the vessel during a scheduled stop at a Draconian outpost. These new arrivals were older Draconians, their scales dulled with age, but their bearing no less imposing than the king's. Council observers, Scholar Nexus explained quietly to Mia and Theo as they watched the newcomers being formally greeted by the king. They have come to assess the situation directly before our arrival at the capital. The observers made their presence felt immediately, attending signing sessions and scrutinizing the developing bridge language with expressions that even Mia, still learning to read Draconian facial cues, could interpret as skeptical at best. One observer in particular, introduced as Elder Vorax, seemed especially critical. His scales were a faded green that had once likely been vibrant, and a network of scars across his throat and chest suggested a military background. He fought in the hegemonic wars centuries ago, Prince Kaizan signed to Mia when he noticed her watching the elder. Traditional warrior. Believes communication should be direct and forceful, not hidden behind hands. Has he made his disapproval known to you? Mia asked, signing as she spoke. The prince's scales darkened momentarily. Many times. He sees my condition as weakness, unworthy of future king. Mia felt a surge of protective indignation on the prince's behalf, but before she could respond, Elder Vorax himself approached their table in the study area where they had been working. The human teaches you more of her silent language, the elder observed, his voice a grating rasp that contrasted sharply with the melodious tones of most Draconians Mia had met. Prince Kaizan straightened, his posture becoming formal as he signed a response that Mia couldn't fully follow. I can understand your gestures well enough, young prince, Elder Vorax said dismissively. I merely question the wisdom of investing so heavily in a communication method used by a tiny fraction of a minor species. Mia knew she should probably remain silent, but diplomacy had never been her strong suit. With respect, Elder, sign language isn't just for those who cannot speak. It's a complete language with its own grammar and expressiveness. And the compatibility between human signs and Draconian royal signs suggests there might be fundamental principles of nonverbal communication that transcend species boundaries. Elder Vorax turned his ancient gaze upon her, and Mia fought the urge to shrink back. You speak boldly for a servant girl elevated far beyond her station. She speaks truth. Prince Kaizan signed forcefully, his movements so emphatic that even those without training could likely interpret his meaning. And station comes from actions, not birth. Her actions worthy of respect. The elder's scales darkened with what Mia had learned indicated displeasure. You allow your personal gratitude to cloud your judgment, young prince. This human happened upon a curiosity, nothing more. To elevate it to diplomatic significance is folly. Is it folly to seek new paths of understanding between species? Mia asked, maintaining eye contact despite her nervousness. Or to recognize value in communication methods different from what you're accustomed to? It is folly to disrupt centuries of tradition for a passing fancy, Elder Vorax replied sharply. The Draconian Empire has endured because we remain true to our core principles and strengths. Accommodating weakness has never been our way. Prince Kaizen began to sign again, his movements increasingly agitated, but Elder Vorix turned away without waiting for the complete response. The council will evaluate this initiative upon our arrival, he said over his shoulder. I suggest you prepare for disappointment, human. After the elder departed, Mia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well, that was tense. The prince's scales rippled with a complex pattern that Mia couldn't fully interpret. He signed, sorry for his words. Old views, dying slowly. It's all right. I've dealt with plenty of grumpy customers at the diner, Mia joked, trying to lighten the mood. But Prince Kaizen remained serious. Important you understand, Council has power. If they reject sign language initiative, even Father may not override. Mia nodded slowly. Scholar Nexus warned me there might be resistance. But surely they'll see the value once they understand the full potential. Hope so. The prince signed, though his expression remained concerned. But prepare for challenge. That challenge materialized fully when they arrived at Draconius Prime, the ancestral homeworld of the draconian species and seat of the imperial government. From orbit, the planet appeared as a swirl of deep greens and blues, with land masses shaped in patterns unlike any on Earth or human colony worlds. As their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, Mia and Theo pressed against the viewport, taking in their first glimpse of an alien homeworld. The capital city spread below them, a sprawling metropolis of soaring spires and organic architecture that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. It's beautiful, Theo signed to Mia, his expression awed. Beyond words, she agreed, signing and speaking simultaneously as had become her habit. Prince Kaizen, seated across from them, watched their reactions with evident pleasure, his scales shifting to warm golden hues. He signed, welcome to my home. First humans to see it. Mia blinked in surprise. We're the first humans to visit Draconius Prime. The prince nodded. Diplomatic exchanges happen on neutral worlds or human territories before. Father insisted you come here. Significant. The significance became even clearer when they landed at the Imperial Complex, a vast collection of structures that dominated the center of the capital. They were greeted by an elaborate reception that included hundreds of draconian officials, all arranged in precise formations that Mia suspected indicated their rank and status within the imperial hierarchy. King Theraxis led them through this imposing gauntlet, with Prince Kaizen walking proudly at his side, and Mia and Theo following a respectful distance behind, accompanied by Scholar Nexus. Mia could feel the weight of countless draconian eyes upon them, evaluating, judging. At the end of the procession stood a semicircle of particularly ancient-looking draconians, their scales faded with extreme age, but their bearing no less formidable. Elder Vorix took his place among this group, which Mia realized must be the Council of Elders that Scholar Nexus had mentioned. The formal reception that followed was conducted entirely in the draconian language, with Scholar Nexus providing whispered translations for Mia and Theo. It consisted primarily of ceremonial exchanges and formal acknowledgments of the king's return, with only brief mention of the human cultural observers who had accompanied the royal party. Once the public ceremony concluded, they were escorted to private quarters within the imperial residence, a suite of rooms that had been adapted for human comfort with furnishings scaled to their size and environmental controls set to Earth normal conditions. The king has arranged for you to rest today and acclimate to our world, Scholar Nexus informed them. Tomorrow, you will be presented to the full council for a more private audience, where the sign language initiative will be formally proposed and evaluated. So soon? Mia asked, suddenly feeling unprepared. Time is a factor, Nexus explained. The Elder Council rarely convenes in full session. The king wishes to take advantage of their presence while ensuring they have minimal opportunity to form coalitions against the proposal. Politics, Theo signed with a grimace, and Mia nodded in agreement. Indeed, Scholar Nexus replied, having become quite proficient in human sign language during their journey. Rest well. Tomorrow will require all your faculties. After the scholar departed, Mia and Theo explored their luxurious accommodations, which included separate sleeping chambers, a shared living area, and amenities that surpassed anything they had experienced on Earth or Novatera. Not bad for a waitress and her little brother, Theo sighed teasingly as he bounced on the bed in his room. Don't get too comfortable, Mia warned, signing back. I have a feeling tomorrow won't be nearly as welcoming as these rooms. Her prediction proved accurate. The following morning, they were escorted to a grand chamber deep within the Imperial complex, where the full council of elders awaited, seated in a semicircle on raised platforms. King Theraxis and Prince Kaizen occupied central positions opposite the council, with space designated for Mia and Theo to one side. The chamber was filled with additional observers, courtiers, and officials who stood along the walls, watching the proceedings with varying degrees of interest or skepticism. Mia recognized some faces from the royal vessel, including younger Draconians who had participated in the signing sessions. Scholar Nexus took a position behind Mia and Theo, ready to translate the proceedings, which were conducted primarily in the Draconian language. The formal presentation of the Sign Language Initiative was made by a royal administrator, who outlined the discovery of compatibility between human sign language and Draconian royal signs, and proposed a comprehensive cultural exchange program to develop a standardized cross-species signing system. Throughout the presentation, Mia watched the council members' reactions. Some appeared thoughtful, others dismissive. Elder Vorax, in particular, made no attempt to hide his disapproval. His scales darkened to a muddy green that Mia had come to associate with displeasure. When the formal presentation concluded, the council's senior member, an ancient Draconian whose pale yellow scales had faded to an almost ghostly white, spoke in a voice that nonetheless carried surprising strength. We have heard the proposal, she said, switching to standard galactic out of courtesy to the human visitors. It is unprecedented in many respects. Before we deliberate, we would hear from those most directly involved. She turned her gaze to Prince Kaizen. Prince of the Draconian Empire, heir to the eternal throne, what say you of this initiative? Prince Kaizen stepped forward and, rather than having another speak for him as was customary in formal settings, began to sign. He used a combination of Draconian royal signs and human signs, creating a bridge language in that very moment. He signed with confidence and eloquence, his movements fluid and precise. Scholar Nexus translated softly for the benefit of those council members who were not familiar with all the signs. Honored Council, I stand before you to advocate for a transformation in how we communicate, not only with humans, but potentially with all species of the Galactic Concord. The compatibility between our royal signs and human sign language is not merely a curiosity, but an opportunity, a gateway to deeper understanding across species boundaries. The prince continued, his signing becoming more impassioned. For too long, I have been viewed as lessened by my inability to vocalize, my thoughts filtered through the voices of others. In this human method of communication, I have found direct expression, a way to speak that is uniquely mine, yet universally understandable. What began as an accommodation for one prince could become a diplomatic asset for our entire empire. Elder Vorax interjected. You allow personal benefit to color your judgment, young prince. This is a matter of imperial policy, not personal convenience. Prince Kaizen's scales darkened momentarily with what Mia recognized as irritation, but his signing remained measured and dignified. Personal experience informs judgment, Elder Vorax, but does not control it. I speak not for my convenience, but for the advancement of our people. Innovation has always been the hallmark of the Draconian Empire, adapting and incorporating strengths wherever we find them. Why should communication be different? Before Vorax could respond, the senior council member raised a hand for silence. We would hear from the human who initiated this discovery. Her ancient eyes turned to Mia. Speak, Mia Bennett of Earth. Mia swallowed nervously, suddenly acutely aware of the hundreds of Draconian eyes fixed upon her. She stepped forward, conscious of her plain human clothing amid the ornate Draconian attire surrounding her. Honored Council, she began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I came to the Draconian Empire by chance, a simple waitress who happened to recognize a connection between our forms of communication. What I've discovered since then is that this connection goes deeper than mere gestures. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Human sign language evolved because people needed to communicate regardless of vocal abilities. It developed independently in different regions of our world, yet with underlying similarities because we share the same physical form. That your royal signs share compatibility with our signs despite evolving on different worlds suggests something profound about communication itself. That perhaps there are universal principles that transcend the accidents of evolution or geography. Mia switched to signing as she continued speaking, demonstrating the bridge language that she and the prince had been developing. In just the few weeks since our first meeting, Prince Kaizan and I have developed a substantial vocabulary of shared signs. My brother Theo, who has been deaf since birth, has found he can communicate directly with the prince and other Draconians who have learned these signs, without needing me or anyone else to translate. Elder Vorax interrupted again. A curiosity, perhaps, but hardly worthy of imperial resources and attention. The Draconian Empire has endured for millennia through strength and tradition, not by adopting the practices of younger, lesser species. Mia felt a flash of anger at the dismissive tone, but before she could respond, Theo stepped forward, signing forcefully. Scholar Nexus translated his signs for the council. With respect, Elder, strength comes in many forms. I have been called lesser and deficient my entire life because I cannot hear or speak as others do. Yet I have thoughts and ideas and contributions to make. Through sign language, I can express everything any spoken language can convey. Prince Kaizan has the mind and heart of a leader, regardless of whether his thoughts come through his mouth or his hands. Theo's expression was passionate as he continued. If two species from different worlds can find common ground in something as fundamental as communication, doesn't that suggest possibilities far beyond what either of us has yet imagined? Isn't that worth exploring, even if it challenges tradition? A murmur ran through the assembly, and Mia noticed several of the younger Draconians along the walls nodding in agreement. Even some council members seemed thoughtful at Theo's words. The senior council member raised her hand again, bringing silence to the chamber. You speak with conviction, young human, and there is wisdom in your perspective. She turned to King Theraxis. My king, you have remained silent throughout. What is your position on this matter? King Theraxis rose to his full, imposing height. I stand with my son and our human guests. The Draconian Empire was not built by clinging to the past, but by recognizing opportunity and seizing it. We face challenges in our relations with the galactic concord that traditional methods have failed to address. Perhaps it is time for new approaches, new pathways to understanding. He gestured toward Prince Kaizan. My son has shown more engagement with diplomatic matters since meeting these humans than in all the years prior. He has found his voice, though not in the way tradition might have preferred. I would not silence that voice again. Elder Vorax and several other council members shifted uncomfortably, their scales darkening. But the senior member inclined her head thoughtfully. We have heard enough for initial consideration, she announced. The council will deliberate privately on this matter. Until we reach a decision, the human guest will continue to be accommodated within the imperial residence, and the preliminary work on this sign language initiative may proceed under Scholar Nexus's supervision. With that, the formal audience concluded. As they were escorted from the chamber, Mia caught Prince Kaizan's eye. He signed quickly. You spoke well. Council impressed, even if not showing. I hope so, she signed back. I hadn't planned on addressing an alien council when I woke up this morning. The prince's scales rippled with amusement. Life rarely follows plans. Sometimes better that way. In the days that followed, while the council deliberated, Mia and Theo continued their work with Prince Kaizan and an expanding circle of Draconians interested in the developing bridge language. Despite the uncertainty hanging over the initiative's official status, enthusiasm among younger Draconians seemed to grow rather than diminish. It's spreading faster than we anticipated, Scholar Nexus observed one afternoon as they watched a group of Draconian youths practicing signs with Theo in one of the Imperial Gardens. Particularly among the younger generation. They see it as a connection to something beyond our traditional boundaries. Do you think that will influence the council? Mia asked. Nexus's scales shifted in a pattern that Mia had come to recognize as uncertainty. Perhaps. The council values tradition, but they also recognize that the Empire must evolve to maintain its position in the galactic community. Your timing may prove fortunate in that respect. What do you mean? Relations between the Empire and certain factions within the Galactic Concord have been strained of late. There are those who view Draconians as arrogant and isolationist, too bound by ancient ways to engage meaningfully with younger species. This initiative could help counter that perception. Mia considered this information thoughtfully. So it's not just about communication. It's about perception and politics. The two are rarely separable at the Imperial level, Nexus acknowledged. But that doesn't diminish the genuine value of what you and Prince Kaizan are developing. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a royal messenger, who bowed formally before addressing Scholar Nexus in the Draconian language. The council has reached a preliminary decision, Nexus translated for Mia after a brief exchange. We are summoned to hear their judgment. They gathered once more in the Grand Council chamber, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. Mia stood beside Theo, both of them trying to appear calm despite their nervousness. Prince Kaizan joined them, his scales shifting with subtle patterns that suggested he was equally anxious about the council's decision. King Theraxis took his position at the center of the chamber, his expression impassive as the council members filed in and took their seats. When all were assembled, the senior council member rose to speak. We have deliberated on the matter of the cross-species sign language initiative, she announced, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. Our decision was not reached lightly, nor without significant debate. Mia felt her heart racing as the ancient Draconian paused, her pale eyes sweeping across the assembled observers. Tradition is the foundation of the Draconian Empire, the elder continued. It has guided us through millennia of challenges and triumphs. To set aside tradition requires compelling cause and clear benefit. Elder Vorax and his allies among the council sat straighter, their scales brightening with what Mia interpreted as anticipation of victory. She felt her spirit sinking. However, the senior member went on. Adaptability is also a cornerstone of our success as a species and an empire. We have endured because we recognize strength and value where they exist, incorporating them into our identity rather than rejecting them out of pride or fear. Now it was King Theraxis and Prince Kaizan whose scales brightened, a ripple of color spreading across their crests. The council has determined that the sign language initiative will proceed on a provisional basis, the elder announced. For a period of 1 standard year, resources will be allocated for the development and implementation of a standardized cross-species signing system, with particular focus on Draconian human communication. At the end of this period, outcomes will be evaluated against specific metrics of diplomatic and cultural benefit. She turned her ancient gaze directly to Mia and Theo. The human initiators of this project will be granted formal status as cultural ambassadors, with appropriate accommodations and resources for the duration of the provisional period. Scholar Nexus will continue to serve as primary liaison and administrator for the project. Finally, she addressed Prince Kaizan. Prince of the Draconian Empire, heir to the eternal throne, the Council acknowledges your advocacy and insights in this matter. You will serve as the imperial representative for this initiative, with authority to implement its findings within appropriate diplomatic contexts. The prince's scales rippled with vibrant colors, and he signed a formal acknowledgement that conveyed both gratitude and determination. Elder Vorax rose from his seat, his expression clearly displeased despite the formal setting. I must register a formal note of dissent, Elder Sorella. While I accept the Council's majority decision, I maintain that this initiative represents an unnecessary deviation from proven imperial policies and an inappropriate elevation of human cultural practices. Elder Sorella, the senior council member, inclined her head in acknowledgement. Your dissent is noted, Elder Vorax, as is your right. However, the council has spoken. The initiative will proceed as outlined. With that, the formal session concluded. As the assembly began to disperse, Prince Kaizan approached Mia and Theo, his signing animated with excitement. We succeeded. Council approval, even if provisional. Significant victory. Mia smiled, relief washing over her. I can't believe it. When Elder Vorax stood up, I thought we were done for. Traditionalists always resist change, The prince signed, his scales rippling with amusement. But change comes regardless. In the months that followed, the sign language initiative flourished beyond anyone's expectations. The bridge language, officially named Concordia Signs, spread rapidly throughout the Draconian court and beyond. Young Draconians embraced it enthusiastically, and diplomatic missions to other Concord worlds began incorporating sign demonstrations that fascinated representatives from dozens of species. 1 year later, Mia and Theo stood beside Prince Kaizen as Elder Sorella announced the council's final verdict. Concordia Signs would become a permanent fixture in Draconian diplomatic training, with expanded resources allocated for its further development. Even Elder Vorix had softened his stance after witnessing a historical first. Prince Kaizen delivering an entire diplomatic address in Concordia Signs at a Galactic Concord Summit, with representatives from 17 species following along through trained interpreters. The prince's eloquence had earned standing ovations and generated unprecedented goodwill toward the Draconian Empire. "You have given me more than a voice," Prince Kaizen signed to Mia during the celebration that followed the council's final approval. "You have shown our people that different does not mean lesser." Mia smiled, watching as Theo demonstrated complex technical signs to a group of Draconian engineers. Her brother had found his purpose as lead instructor at the newly established Concordia Communication Institute. "When I saw you in that diner," she signed back, "I never imagined where one simple gesture would lead." King Theraxis approached, his scales gleaming with pride. "The Galactic Concord has formally recognized Concordia Signs as an official diplomatic language," he announced. "The first communication system ever to be jointly developed by two species." Looking around at the gathering, humans and Draconians communicating fluidly through signs, ideas flowing unimpeded by the barriers that had once separated them. Mia felt a profound sense of completion. What had begun with a waitress noticing a silent prince had transformed into a bridge between worlds, proving that sometimes the most profound connections begin with the simplest act of recognition. "Sometimes," she signed to the prince as they watched the celebrations, "the universe just needs someone to see what others have overlooked." The Dragon Prince's scales shimmered in agreement, his hands forming the sign they had created together, meaning both understanding and future, inseparable concepts in the language they had built between worlds. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.